What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favelli coming at you with a super brief sub 30-second intro. The podcast you're about to listen to, our biggest X factors for every potential 2024 NBA playoff team, was one, awesome. I think Grant and I did a fantastic job. But two, we talked about the Heat and the Knicks and the Julius Randle injury and OG Anunoby at length. We did this before we got word that Tyler Hero was progressing towards a return and before we got word that OG Anunoby was going to play on Friday. It doesn't change the context of our discussion too much, but wanted to cover our bases there. So if you're listening to that and you skip this and you don't know what's going on, that's on you. But I just wanted to let everybody know that we mentioned specifically with Anunoby, since we went quite long on the Knicks at the end of the podcast, that he did return. He played against the Bulls. And so please factor that into our discussion. But let's get to it. What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favelli coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are here to talk about our biggest X factor for every potential 2024 NBA playoff team, because as of right now, Grant, there are 21 potential NBA playoff teams as we record this when you factor in squads that are going to be in the play-in. And we might have 19 teams for the first time in NBA history finish over 500, which would be really fucking cool, actually. Before we get started, please sub and stuff already. But really, the real question that I have, Grant, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's the thought occurred to me when you were doing your intro. Do you ever like wake up in the middle of the night and just find yourself saying, like, going into your intro spiel because you said it so many times, like, because you don't even, it must be full autopilot at this point, right? Like you don't even hear the words you're saying for things like that.
It's funny because it's not autopilot, because I will be like, if I'm doing guess or something, I might not say what's crack-a-lackin'. So
Sure.
it's just like in my head where it's like, I don't want to. Sometimes I feel like that I'm like culturally appropriating something that I shouldn't by saying crack-a-lackin', but our listeners have demanded that I continue to say it anyway. So it's all, that part's always ingrained in my head. I guess asking you how you're doing is on autopilot, but it's also something that I'm like, I cut the whole, it used to be a longer spiel of like, subscribe, comment, and all
Right.
that. But I cut that because it's like newbies aren't going to care if they're listening to us for the first time to hear that at the beginning. They're more likely, if they listen to the end, to do that. So I don't care about the call to action. I care about making sure that we talk about how you are faring in your life.
Also, you know that it kind of puts me on my back foot right away because I usually haven't prepared a bit like as an answer, because that feels like pretty hack. Sometimes I'll have something, I'll think of something like, oh, this might be clever. But generally it's like I try to shift the focus off of me as quickly as possible. So now I'm even more uncomfortable because I've put it firmly back on myself.
Grant hates being the center of attention, which is why starting next week he will be doing only solo podcasts.
Yeah, and I'll ask myself how I'm doing, and it's just going to be like a weird spiral where I never pull out of it.
I would love for you to record a solo podcast just to see how you do talking to yourself for 45 minutes to an hour. Because I know you've listened to some of mine, and it's just like there's no breath when I do it, because that's the only way I can do it. Otherwise, if I stop and think, I then am suddenly very aware that I am just having a conversation with myself.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how you do it. It's well, it's like radio hosts, like back in the day, like still, I guess they're still radio hosts, but like when you're just don't have callers and you're just talking, like I just don't, it's a hard thing to do. So, and you do it really well. So either I didn't listen to early Dan solo pods and you were just like dead silent for like 7-minute stretches while you tried to think of something to say, or you're a natural at it.
I will say Keith Parrish, and I know he's not podcasting anymore, but Lazarus Jackson are two of like some of the best solo podcasters that like I could listen to their episodes. It just, everything seemed like very natural, not like they were trying to fill airtime or talk a zillion miles a minute like I do.
Such a skill. If I did it, I would just read something I wrote. I feel like there'd be
Grant's on screen just whips out like this long roll of paper, is like scrolling.
No, I'd put it behind the camera and hope you couldn't see my eyes like typewritering left to right.
You could probably do it really well. And Knicks Film School kind of does this with their post games, even though Andrew Claudio, their producer, will like come in and talk to Macri, but like he'll just respond to the comments. And so that makes it a little bit easier, but he'll also do like a monologue at the beginning, which is different when you're trying to, you're making these points and then it's like, well, there's no one to either agree with me or come back at me to have the actual discussion. So I hate solo podcasts. Our listeners don't seem to mind them though, which is pretty cool.
It's a credit to you. You win all the arguments when you're only talking to yourself.
Those are the only arguments I win are on solo podcasts. We are here to talk about X factors, though. So we have all the teams up there on the screen if you want to watch on YouTube, or at least just go to YouTube, throw us a like, throw us a comment. That'd be fun too. We're gonna go alphabetically because we like to take risks over here. And Grant is gonna be our fearless leader throughout this entire process. We've just decided this.
Yep. Let's start alphabetically then, and it's also helpful that I can see the logos. So if I do get tripped up, I'll have some help here.
I hope you did say you were upset that there was only one
I know
Houston Rockets logo.
I missed the Yao Steve Francis Rockets logo, but that's okay. We did just go with one this time. So sorry, Rockets fans, you don't get the double dip logo. We're starting with the Atlanta Hawks. So this we obviously, by virtue of starting with the Hawks, we're talking about play-in teams as well. That's why the field is so big here. And even, I mean, the Rockets are not a play-in team at present, but they're not totally out of it yet either. So we're going to talk about them. So for the Hawks, going with Jalen Johnson, and I should say, I think he's pretty close to the line. We'll get some better players in a vacuum, but we're not going to go with like DeJounte Murray or like Trey or, whatever. We're not going to pick the best guys because that just doesn't feel like it's in the spirit of being an X factor, like, which is such a fuzzy, I mean, I dare you to define an X factor in the, like in a firm way for this exercise. It's obviously just, kind of a gimmick, but like, it can't be someone that's like, if they play poorly, this team is like sunk. Like we can't pick Jokic. We can't pick, Steph Curry. It's just like, we can't go that high. And you really can't go like, I think even someone like Jaylen Brown for the Celtics would probably be too good of a player. So Johnson is pretty close to that because you could make the case that like if Young doesn't play, he's Atlanta's second best player. But still, we're going with him. In the doc that nobody listening can see, you also have Trae Young's right hand in parentheses. So not a bad X factor, but Johnson is just someone that like, I don't know, you can talk about this too, but like his athleticism, his two-way play, like the way that he might end up guarding somebody really dangerous, assuming they play Chicago in that first playing game. I mean, he might spend some time on DeMar DeRozan for all we know if Hunter can't do it. So he's kind of a swing piece for Atlanta. But I don't know. It's hard to say, like, again, that he matters more than say DeJounte or if Trae Young, if he's going to play.
I think what appealed to me about him is that he's just the answer regardless of what iteration of the Hawks are kind of taking the floor, because without Trae, his offensive role kind of increases. And I think DeAndre Hunter might be a close second if you really want to get sick and be like, well, Vic Krejci's been playing some really good defense over the past few weeks. But just like the stuff that he could do as kind of the secondary playmaker, getting them out in transition, the stuff he can do in transition, his defensive body of work, I assume, is only going to get more difficult because you're talking about, you still have Hunter, but the injury to Sadiq Bey, that was a body to throw at. And then are you really gonna, if there was a Hall of Fame for players who remain way too important to how their teams need to defend on the perimeter, Wesley Matthews would be first ballot. But are you really going to go to him in like the higher? You probably will, but like Jalen Johnson is going, like his defensive body of work is just going to get harder. And then the other thing with him, I'm going to borrow your phrase of the skeleton key for just certain lineups where it's like where you want to try different stuff up front. He makes sense next to Clint Capella. He makes sense next to Onyeka Okongwu. If they want to get really, creative, he is the small ball 5 option without any other big kind of on the court. And so I think I'm with you. The Hawks and the Celtics, ironically, were the teams where it felt like they had like high profile players needed to be the answer. We might run into this with another team. And I know there's like, I think you could go like with the Cavs too, like if you want to talk about one of their younger players, but like you said, to just go through the criteria, we're generally going to avoid the stars on a team. And like Johnson, I think he would have won most improved player had he met the games minimum. Like he probably would have been my pick. Well, Scotty Barnes would have been my pick if he met the games minimum.
It was both our picks for a minute.
He's towing the line, but he's not quite there yet. And honestly, it's just, he's their third best player, maybe their second most important one. And so it's just like, we'll leave it. Like, I think he fits. Yeah. I don't think we're breaking the spirit of this too much with him.
No. Which, speaking of, we might be doing it with the next team, which is the Boston Celtics. However, as everyone who's listening to this or watching this is aware, like the Celtics just happen to have their top 6 is littered with only good players. So we're going to go with Derek White here. And it's just like, you can't choose Tatum, you can't choose Brown. I mean, Porzingis is kind of a logical X factor pick just because like he's the one that might break certain defenses because you can't switch a small onto him because he's the best post up player in the league in terms of per possession. They don't like, and they basically only post him up when they get a switch. So it just kind of ruins a pretty standard postseason defensive scheme a lot of teams will employ. But White is someone that's like, he may be, it may be on him to bring the ball up. It may be on him to guard the other team's best player. He might have massive help defense responsibilities. He's a weirdly good rim protector, weirdly great rim protector for a player his size. So he's just going to have all these, he might wear like 3 different hats across, the span of a series. And so he feels kind of, even though again, he's maybe a little too good, just, objectively, he does kind of fit the idea of an X factor because like, it implies like some level of, I'm not even sure what this guy's going to do, but it's going to matter.
Right. And it's just, if you're not going to pick someone inside their top 6, it's Sam Hauser or it's maybe Xavier Tillman. And I think you could probably make a case for Al Horford because it's like they might want to throw him at Giannis in that matchup if that's something they pull. And
he gets the Embiid assignment a lot too.
Yeah. So that could be a good one. He's clearly not at a star level anymore. So you could, but it just felt like if we're going to pick someone inside the top 6 anyway, I'm just going to give it to Derek White, who kind of wears, I think he wears, aside from Jason Tatum, he's the player on this team that wears the most hats, right? Maybe it's Drew Holiday, but
I mean, Holiday's role, at least offensively, is so small now. Like White has a much bigger offense, I'm agreeing with you. I think, you could go Holiday, but that like, Holiday hasn't been much of an X factor for them this year. He's just a really good 2-way player that's accepted a smaller offensive role. Like that's,
his jump shot is an X factor because it disappears generally in the playoffs.
Yeah. And he's been, just shot the lights out. So okay. So we're at a true X factor now, I think, as we get to the Chicago Bulls. Your favorite, my favorite, underrated, elite backcourt / can guard wings defender, Ayo Dosunmu. I think this is a perfect X factor, in large part because you've got DeMar DeRozan and Kobe White who are going to have to play major offensive roles. You shouldn't feel great about either of them guarding, their positional matchup if that guy is a real threat. Now, if this is Atlanta, it's a different thing. But if they do wind up playing in a playoff series, you're going to need Dosunmu to potentially guard whoever the best guy is from 1 to 3, and maybe even spend some time on 4s. And then that's without getting into his shooting, which has just, been a revelation this year, just under 40%. His volume is up. But for me, it's the defensive side, just because he, Caruso is obviously going to come in and play whatever his customary like 27 minutes are. But Dosunmu, I think, is going to be someone that they rely on both ends and on defense against like some of the most dangerous matchups they're going to see.
Yeah. And like the other thing too with him is that they need him to kind of create more, not necessarily off the dribble, but like to get downhill and generate some rim pressure. And so if he can do that, that adds like a whole different value to their offense as well. And we've seen them try to focus on that more. And he just needs to be more aggressive overall. He does shoot a lot out of the pick and roll, but it's kind of in the same spots, in the same situations. It's more about, can they get him all the way downhill and to the basket? And so can he contribute as both that shooter and the secondary playmaker that he is, but then also as just this multi-level scorer? And he's shown for stints that he can. And if he does, the Bulls aren't going to do anything special in the postseason, but if you're talking about them actually reaching the postseason, he's going to be a pretty huge.
Yeah, I think there's a few guys that feels like the purest one so far. We have the Cavs next. So I can't remember. Are we going to go with the better player that we discussed, or are we going to go with what's on the dock? We can't do it.
I think we need to go with Isaac Okoro. And I will say we did consider Evan Mobley or Darius Garland, because Darius Garland has been uneven, to put it kindly, and maybe just bad, to be a little bit more blunt about it. And then there's also the Evan Mobley element where is he going to give JB Bickerstaff a reason to have him close games? Like, is he going to be able to make it work offensively with the dual big stuff this season? And that's going to matter in a playoff series for them. But it just felt like those guys are, oh, wow, Evan Mobley didn't play well, or Evan Mobley isn't closing games. Is that an idea? It just felt sort of like too done. With Isaac Okoro specifically, I think he'll get some all defense love this season, and we know he can do that. The three-pointer's been falling. He's a pretty solid cutter. He will be a ball mover. He will get out in transition. Can you do that all? Can you maintain that offensive role efficiently in the playoffs when the pressure changes, but defenses are going to be different, where they might even care about him less? Or if they start to care about him, how does he react to that? And so and if you are, going to get into a lot of the one big lineups, like he becomes ultra important in those combinations as well. So how do those wind up holding up in the postseason?
Yeah, I think it's got to be him. I would just say, like, I probably should retire this take because I feel like I've given it 50 times. But the way that Mobley couldn't handle duties as a role guy against the Knicks in the playoffs last year just set him up this postseason to like prove that you figured it out, right? Like, I don't know who they're going to match up against. Hypothetically, we don't know if the same coverage will be there that gave him trouble. We don't know if the fact that the Cavs have more shooters to put around the perimeter will make it so Mobley doesn't have to sort of succeed where he failed. But like in terms of like the narrative part of it, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it really did stick in my mind that Mobley was not up for the task that the Knicks put in front of him last year in the playoffs. And this would have been, it may be another opportunity for him to prove that he's grown, especially, you know, coming off a year where he missed a bunch of time again. That maybe isn't a fair thing to ask, but that's why I think he was, if we were including like more top end guys, I think he would have been a pretty sensible pick there. That takes us to Dallas. This one is pretty clear to, I think, both of us. And that is PJ Washington, new addition at the deadline, coming over and kind of remaking this roster with Daniel Gafford at the, you know, sort of in this reconstituted, bigger, more athletic lineup that is now defending for Dallas. Why is PJ Washington specifically the X factor here?
I think it's, I mean, one, can he hit threes is
Yep.
like ends up being a huge deal.
29% with Dallas so far.
So that is absolutely needs to be part of the discussion, but he's going to, so much of the defensive responsibility is going to fall to him. When you're looking at some of the guys he's needed to cover since he's been there, and even dating back to his time in Charlotte, I actually have been impressed with the way that he's handled that by and large. But I think why he becomes the X factor is Dallas is sort of discovered a lot about themselves, or they know how good they are with Daniel Gafford. But when you are trying to build out their most important units, the only locks are Luka, Kyrie, and I think PJ Washington, because you can move him around defensively so much. And he might create some challenges at points offensively, but whether it's playing next to a rim running big, or if you want to go downsize with Maxi Kleber, or, and we know they don't try this, if you want to go with the three big route with Washington and Kleber and a rim running big and Lively or Gafford, then that's going to fall, you know, the responsibility of guarding even more wings or harder assignments is going to fall on Washington. And you also just know, they found some stuff where they're toggling the levers with, is it a Tim Hardaway Jr. night? Is it a Dante Exum or Derrick Jones Jr.? PJ Washington Jr. is more of a constant because of what we know he can do offensively. And they gave up a top 2 protected pick to get him. And so I've been very impressed with what he's done defensively in Dallas. They need that to hold up in the playoffs? And then he also is an X factor for his offense, because will defenses treat him differently if his threes continue to not go in and he's not involved in these primary actions as often as he could be in certain other units?
Yeah, like it's tempting to say, well, just to play devil's advocate. Like, I mean, look, if Washington isn't getting guarded, like he goes 0 for, you know, in their first playoff game, and then every defense is just sagging way off of him and clogging the lane or putting 2 on Luka. Well, they have Derrick Jones and they have Exum, and like those guys both kind of give them similar things. Exum obviously further down the positional spectrum, but like Dallas, I don't think wants to be in a position where it's like, well, we can't play Washington. We have to rely on these next 2 guys who, you know, have real value. But like, if Washington isn't a value add on both ends, I think, and it's not like you're asking them to do much on offense besides hit open threes and cut and stuff. That's a huge, like, Dallas is in trouble. Like, that's a problem, because you don't want to suddenly have to be in the business of, well, Derrick Jones has got to play 30 minutes, or like Exum has to be healthy every night and giving us like a major role. That's a scary spot for them to be in.
Yeah, I'm glad that I was wondering if, I think you could make a case for Kleba because of this different types of lineups he in theory could unlock, but just the way that Gafford is played, I don't think you look at that and say, oh, like we need Maxi Kleba to be like potentially this 25 to 30 minute a game player in the postseason. I'd be very shocked if that's what.
I think in any of the last like 3 or 4 playoffs, it would have been Kleba, just because he was always he can protect the rim a little bit and move on the perimeter and all that. Like he was the change up to like, well, we can't play our conventional big. I think Dallas should still like be open to that against certain matchups, but it's like Gafford's been so good and Lively has had his moments too, where I think they just, one of those 2 big, like real bigs should just be on the floor almost all the time, unless I don't know what specific, maybe the Clippers go 5 out or something like that. That's where you might go back to Kleba.
Do you know what's strange? I don't want to spend too much time on this, but Mavericks fans have been generally mad at us in the YouTube comments still. I still would not have done what they did at the trade deadline, I don't think, but I was not even recognizing. I think, Gafford has done a lot of the stuff I expect him to do. They've been way better off with those two guys than I would have expected. And it's this weird situation where, if they make a deep playoff run and they're in the Western Conference Finals or something, I'll be step back and say, okay, it was worth it. But it's this weird situation where they are thriving post-trade deadline with these two guys, and I still wouldn't have made the trade.
Yeah.
And that might be a bad take. I'm not trying to clown the Mavericks here. I still wouldn't have done it. And I think that's just me taking the longer view, which is fine, but they have undeniably exceeded expectations.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was a really scary trade, and the jury's still out. But maybe the jury will not be out depending on how deep this run goes.
The idea of your best offer being an expiring contract and 2 first-round picks. Now, I'm not saying to get another star, but that's the card to play. I guess if you believe that PJ Washington would have intense value in trade, it changed. That's just makes me uncomfortable. But shout out to the Mavericks. They look pretty fucking scary heading into the postseason.
They do. And they have that guy and that other guy that can really just win games offensively.
Wow, big time Josh Green fan over here. So I spoiled this already. If anyone knows who Peyton Watson is for the Denver Nuggets, his picture came up in the last one. I thought about Michael Porter Jr. here, just because I feel like if things ever bog down offensively or you're not having a good Jamal Murray night, you kind of need Porter to do more than just his shooting and the motion stuff. It's, can maybe he generate some probing downhill for a change? And then I just kind of stopped and thought about it and just if Murray doesn't have it going, there's just Jokic will find everybody else. Or if teams shut down one action, Denver has contingency plans B through Z, excuse me. So I settled on Peyton Watson just because if you're looking at some of the bench units with Aaron Gordon at the 5, we've talked about how he makes the most sense. If it's going to be heavy starters with Aaron Gordon at the 5, no Jokic, then Peyton Watson might make the most sense. The other thing is they're going to need him defensively. And can he make enough of his threes or provide you with enough pressure and finishing at the rim to stay on the court, even if his defense is humming against certain matchups? So they've rolled the dice with their bench. It's just Reggie Jackson's had a better year than we've expected, but they're reliant on Watson, Brown, and Reggie Jackson outside of their top 5. That is not the most proven 6 through 8 or the most bankable 6 through 8 spots in the playoffs. And so I kind of defaulted to Watson, but you could talk me into MPJ if you wanted to.
Well, so I think it's Watson, but the thing I wanted to say about MPJ, and I need your feedback. You need to tell me if this thought that I had and I put in something I wrote the other day did I steal this from someone? Have you heard it someplace before? 1, and 2, whether that answer is yes or no, is it a hacky thing? Because I was thinking about watching a Nuggets game the other day when MPJ is really hot and is every time he touches it, it's going up, and he goes makes 4 threes in a quarter, or just is really just peak MPJ. Mm-hmm. The thing it reminded me of, and probably because I've watched this movie, one of these movies recently, was how in the Alien franchise, it's the xenomorph, which is the alien. Okay, so you tell me if
I can tell you I've not heard this.
Okay,
before.
Cool. So now you just have to tell me if it's a hack thought. So the xenomorph is faster, stronger, more cunning, built is a killing machine, right? It's taller, it's bigger than humans. It can slither through air ducts. It's just can tear you apart, right? That's the Nuggets. And then when Michael Porter Jr. is hitting threes, it's the part in the movies where someone hurts the alien or whatever, and its blood is acid that is strong enough to burn through metal. And you're oh, fuck me. Come on. Really? This is this too? We needed this? This seems this seems unfair. That's the thought of Michael Porter Jr. hitting a bunch of threes, because the Nuggets are already just built to destroy. And then it's oh, cool. They have this other thing too that even makes it completely, beyond unfair, beyond overkill. That's my Michael Porter Jr. thought.
How did anyone in the history of anything have that thought?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I thought I'd heard it from
you. Co-opted it from somebody. I do think it's very apt and makes a ton of sense here.
Great.
So yeah, they're just even with this, just the Celtics are so good and I can't bring myself to pick against the Nuggets when it comes to saying who's going to win the title. And that's while we recognize that they do have wild card aspects within their rotation. And it's just like the trust factor for them with me is just like through the roof. It's absolutely wild.
Okay. And this again, I have another Nuggets thought. I know this is the last one. So I keep hearing a couple different podcasts have raised this when talking about like Jokic's MVP candidate and the Nuggets as a whole. And it's like Jokic is great, but he has the perfect team around him. Like those 4 other guys are just like custom built to be great next to him. And I like want to stop anyone that says that and say like, you saw all those guys or some of them like play with other players. Like Jokic made them that. Like Jokic is the one that allows Aaron Gordon to only do the things Aaron Gordon is great at. And like KCP and Murray, and like, he's the reason these guys seem to fit so well. It's not that like the Nuggets are fortunate to have 4 like perfect co-stars. It's that like Jokic being there and his greatness is like what makes these other 4 guys seem to fit so perfectly. Like with like, it's not an exaggeration to say you could swap out these 4 and get another 4 in there of like similar general ability. And it might not be that different. Like if you gave them a couple years together with Jokic, does that make sense? Like, I think
it's not like you're saying you're attributing any success that they have across their career to Jokic. It's not that he has made their careers. He is the single biggest optimizer of talent around him in the NBA. And I don't even know that it's that close at this point. So
okay, cool. We're on the same page.
That like they've assembled the perfect supporting cast. They've assembled a very good supporting cast. And they made, a lot of people didn't necessarily like the KCP trade. Remember, people were up in arms about the Aaron Gordon extension after they traded for him. And so like, they've like give those guys a ton of credit for figuring out how to fit in with Jokic. That also might be one of the easiest jobs in the NBA. And you know what? You've seen the Jamal Murray without Nikola Jokic minutes.
Right.
Like you understand, like this team is, that just makes the MVP case. And I hate when people say stuff like that because they're diminishing what Jokic is doing. And then you have idiots like us who it sounds like we're kind of diminishing what his supporting cast is doing. And it's like, no, you know what? Aaron Gordon, like being able to fit into this role after he had a lot more agency. Yes, he looked overstretched in Orlando, but like it's hard for players who, by the way, are younger in their prime. I know he got paid like before the adjustments really came in, but he's still busting his ass defensively, even when he doesn't have it going offensively or is getting a ton of usage there. So I want to make it clear, these players deserve, the supporting cast around Jokic deserves all the credit in the world, but like, don't say that. There's always an excuse with Jokic. Like when it comes to it's, he can't defend, he can't win MVP. Before he won a title, it was he can't be the best player on a championship team. And it's just like, come on, like, can we just be above it already?
Yeah. Just assume that like every good thing that happens starts with him. It's not 100% him, but like he's the reason all the good stuff, like guys look so good and everything works out. Like that's
where did you hear that? Who said that?
I don't want to name where the podcast where I heard it. Let's move on to, it was a very popular media outlet that
Bill Simmons. Is that just that's
no, it wasn't him. Let's move on. We're not here to throw shade. I just wanted to have a talking point. Golden State Warriors are next. So I think part of the problem, or one of the issues, I guess it's a problem, is that you could pick like any of like 7 players who you aren't really sure what you're going to get night to night. And it seems like it's important that you get the best version of them for the Warriors to be really successful. But I think it's got to be Andrew Wiggins. And part of that is we've seen how insanely valuable he can be for one postseason. He was the second best player, I think, by many accounts. I think I would probably agree with that on the last title team. And he's been pretty terrible for most of this year, but he'll still get you with some flashes. Really good against Luka the other night. It's scored and defended him really well, makes him work like few other guys can. You just really never know which Wiggins you're going to get. I think the best thing you can say is that when he has a really like a Luka level matchup, he was good on Tatum too. He tends to play better, but like, if you're telling me I have to bank on Wiggins being great, like I just can't get there.
Yeah. I think he's the right pick. Draymond Green is still too high profile where it's, is he going to, decide to get ejected in the first quarter, or what's the, I don't even, I guess you could go with Pods. You could probably go with Kuminga. You could go with, if you really wanted to, you could talk yourself into Trace Jackson Davis or GP2. I think Klay Thompson's still too high profile here? Could it be Steve Kerr for the rotation decisions that he's going to have to make? But it is Andrew Wiggins, because I don't know, like, when's the last time you saw sort of this massive drop off from someone who was just the best player, the second best or third best player on a title contender not too long ago? We're talking about his extension as if it was one of the biggest steals that he signed for so much less. And then he turns into this, like, sort of this pumpkin for most of this year.
Yeah, no, I think it's got to be. I mean, of every player we've gone through so far, he is like miles beyond them in terms of unpredictability. Like, you just really have no idea. All right, let's go to the Houston Rockets. Another team, just because they've kind of been two different teams, like pre and post Şengün injury. There's a lot of different ways to go here. I think Jalen Green is too good to be labeled an X factor, or at least it has been too good the last month plus. So Jabari Smith Jr. feels like an interesting pick. So what is it about him specifically? I think for me, it's the potential to play some small ball five, or whatever you want to call him, when him and Amen Thompson are like your 4-5, which is just bizarre. Stretch the floor, good defender across a couple front court positions. Like, what is it that makes him the X factor, though?
I think, one, it's without Şengün, him playing more five is a big deal, and he's held up really well defensively. I also just think he's quietly had a really good sophomore season. The counting stats won't show it, but he's way more plug and play on offense. He still does like to do things with his counters in the mid range, but as just a floor spacing weapon or a pick and pop option, or even someone who is going to set or slip screens, get to the center of the floor and make reads from there, he just feels smarter. And so he's improved, I would say, incrementally in basically every area except for his 3-point shooting, which is just up and up and up. And also having him at the 5 is a big reason, I think, why you're able to use Amen Thompson the way that you are right now. And so it's a lot of people kind of confounded by saying, oh, Amen Thompson's basically used as a big. And no, he's not. Like, Jabari Smith is the center in those lineups. It's that Amen Thompson might be in the dunker spot. He might set screens. He might do some handoffs. But like, Jabari Smith Jr. helps unlock that, because it gives Amen Thompson room where he's not trying to occupy the same space or running into an Alperen Şengün issue. And so Jabari Smith Jr. winds up being key just in so many different facets to not just helping the defense continue to go, but just like optimizing their most versatile offensive lineups, I think, is the best way to phrase it.
Yeah, it's a pretty classic, like, big guy who can hold up inside but also space the floor, just opens up this, like, just a bunch of options that you just can't get. It allows someone like Thompson to kind of be out there with, him and Şengün, it makes it too tough with the spacing. So if you have Smith and Thompson, or, anybody else, it just kind of is I don't know what the right term is. Like, Jokic as optimizer is kind of a perfect way to put it, but like Smith, or the stretch / rim defending, decent rim defending big, is kind of like I don't know I can't think of it. Opens up your options, I guess, is the best way to put it.
The Indiana Pacers were hard for me. What about you?
I like this. I think the guy we have, which is Aaron Nesmith, I think is the right pick.
Okay. That makes me feel a lot better.
No, well, you can't really, like, maybe you go Nembhard just because, I don't know, or I guess there's some other options. Like TJ McConnell could be someone that just like wrecks half of a quarter by picking up the pace, and I don't know.
Is he too high profile now that he's the best isolation scorer in league history? Or
oh God, what was the other ridiculous McConnell stat I saw? Oh, it was like assist rate on drives or something. It was just off the charts because he always passes.
Him and Malik Monk both.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to that when we talk about six man. I think Nesmith to me is the right pick because, and part of this is going back to the beginning of the year when it was a different team, but like he is capable of guarding up a position. I think just like his physicality and just general intensity is really vital for a Pacers team that can get pushed around a lot. And you better believe like playoff opponents are definitely going to test the Pacers from like a physicality standpoint. Everybody from, Halliburton up to Miles Turner, I think are vulnerable to just kind of getting beaten up a little bit. And Nesmith is just like not here for it. So I think from a demeanor standpoint, as much as anything, he really is going to matter for them. That's exclusive of like, he's a 40+% 3-point shooter that guards his ass off.
I think an honorable mention for their X factor would be beating teams that they're supposed to beat, but you don't really run into, they're not supposed to beat anybody in the playoffs. That gets weird, but they've just dropped like way too many. What the hell is going on here, to the point where I did include him, but he got the final spot when I just filed my All NBA stuff for Bleacher Report. But I have to file another one, and we're going to talk about All NBA. As of right now, I don't think Halliburton's making All NBA for me. That's first part of the season was special, but we've now just had like this like 30 game sample size of just like he's had some really good performance, but just everything looks so off. I don't know how much of that is the injury, the roster turnover midseason, but that's just another thing. Like Tyrese Halliburton's hamstring might be the X factor.
Okay, yeah, no, I think like let me ask you this: does what has happened post hamstring injury like make you any less bullish on the idea of Tyrese Halliburton for next year and beyond? You know what I mean? Like it affects what he did this year, obviously, because he was so bad for several weeks. But I think it's the injury.
I think if anything, I just would love to see him, Siakam get to go through a training camp together, and then the Pacers kind of now that I think they understand like the stuff that they still need on this roster and what might be more important. And so can they address that over the offseason? There is some awkwardness there where I think Bennedict Mathurin probably exceeded my expectations before he got injured with a lot of the stuff he did this year. When we've seen in stints like Jarris Walker kind of, he can defend wings, but can he offensively be a 3? Do you have enough of that going on? They have to answer some questions, but it has not changed how I feel about Tyrese Halliburton long-term in the slightest.
Yeah, me either. Let's go to the Clippers here. We had a late change on this one. It's going to be the man in the middle, Ivica Zubac. And it was Terrence Mann, but I think we correctly have moved to Zubac, which is like he's your starting center. So maybe that gets up against the he's too good type of thing. But it's got to be him, right? Because this is the playoffs and we know what the questions are for kind of defensively important but limited big guys.
Right. And look, I think we've seen them run into some issues over the past few weeks, specifically defensively with him in certain matchups. And they're not really built to navigate that well. And because like the idea, like PJ Tucker's just like a footnote at this point. And so if you're going to run those smaller units, it's really like Kawhi is your 5 and like Amir Coffey's on the point. I mean, that's why you can make a case for Coffey being an X factor if you think they're going to get to those lineups a lot. But I think the best version of them, especially because of the way that Zubac developed chemistry with James Harden, is that you want to see him on the floor. I just feel like there are matchups where teams will play bigs and you might just question, well, how does Zubac even fare? And it's not just a matter because when you go look at who they might face in the Western Conference, it's not all these teams are just going to play without a center. But like, even if you went up against the Lakers and Anthony Davis at the 5, if you oddly, yeah, you're fine. If you have to face Minnesota, how do you fare against, Sacramento if it's Sabonis and the way that they've had to downsize like around Sabonis? So it feels like there are a few teams. I wouldn't put the Kings at the top of that list, but like the Pelicans could give them matchup. The Thunder could certainly give them matchup problems. And that's not just, these teams might be smaller when you're looking outside their 5-man rotation, but we're not just saying there are these teams playing without centers. There are actually center matchup issues offensively that can cause Zubac problems on defense. I feel like though for 3/4 of this season, or maybe that's overstating the length of it, I didn't think it was an issue just watching him. And now all of a sudden it feels like maybe it's a collective thing because their defense has been by and large since the All-Star break, just absolute dog shit.
Yeah, it's like bottom 3, I think. So it's like everybody's on notice now. him and everyone else.
Given a shit about defending in transition all year. Like that's been a thing.
Well, and he's the last guy that's going to be helpful there, right? Like that's a struggle.
He's actually probably been, like when you go back and watch some of the frames with how many Clippers players are out of it when they're getting back in transition, he's probably been one of their more valuable guys. Actually,
well, yeah, there's a couple former stars that maybe aren't getting back. All right, that takes us to the Lakers. This one has to be Rui Hachimura. Shot. I was looking because remember in the last postseason, it's like what is this,
right? What, 1 trillion percent or something? What did
the 3-point shooting in the first round, 52.4%. So, and it was like 11 to 21. Next round against the Warriors, he was only 5 of 9, but that's also good for 55.6%. Then he went 3 for 9 against the Nuggets in getting swept. But then he shot 42% from 3 this year. So like, if that's legit and you're going to get the version of Hachimura that provides like good size as a forward, is athletic in ways that like there's not a lot of that going on with guys that the Lakers can actually play, so shout out to Cam Reddish. So he just like, he does things that they can't get from other guys. So I think that to me is like the key for him.
I think Austin Reeves is too high profile for this, but the
Yeah.
stuff he does, and I'm like, he does a lot of X factor stuff, but it's so critical to like, the kind of undersized screening or the cutting or even the defensive assignments, and now the 3-point shooting and volume. But it's like, okay, well, that's he's their third most important player. I think you could probably make a case for Gabe Vincent too, just because he's healthy now, and it's where does he factor into the rotation? What does he end if he's the Gabe Vincent that you thought you were signing? Not really from last postseason, but like 2 postseasons ago, that becomes a big deal. But Rui's just the right answer because if you want to go D'Lo or Austin Reeves, I think they're too high profile for this. I would, if someone just said Gabe Vincent because he's barely played this year, I would listen to it. But Rui, even when you look at you mentioned the offensive stuff, like the defensive stuff, like the assignments he's going to have to carry so that Anthony Davis is carrying probably when you look at, I look at it in the players who wear this many hats on defense. I think like Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo might be in a tier of their own at this point. And so Rui Hachimura has the ability to maybe make life slightly easier on AD, but also he makes it a lot easier on LeBron too. And so I think I don't want to say he's the only choice, but I think he's like the right one here.
Yeah. I mean, D'Lo is kind of related to you mentioned him, but like the Gabe Vincent D'Lo interplay, it's like if D'Lo just can't stay on the floor defensively for however many playoffs this would be in a row, then oh my God, Gabe Vincent is important. Like that's a really scary position to be in. But yeah, I agree. D'Lo is kind of too high profile. Let's move to the Miami Heat. Here we have one Terry Rozier. He's worth a first round pick. Trade deadline acquisition.
He looked like he was worth a first round pick against the Knicks the other night.
He sure did. What, he hit 8 threes? Yeah. So tell me why he's the Heat's X factor.
I just think you look at Jimmy Butler, maybe he will flip the switch because we've seen it. And I said I shouldn't doubt the Heat, but something just feels way off about their offense. But you look at all the factors there. Bam has the mid-range game going. He could do a lot of stuff on offense, and he is more aggressive than people give him credit for. You just can't run the entire show through him. He's not going to give you, well, I shouldn't say that. You can't get that off the bounce creation and shot making element from him at that perimeter level because he needs to be closer to the basket there, like when he's going to do his stuff off the dribble. And then the Tyler Hero injury looms. And then if Jimmy Butler isn't getting downhill as easy or hitting shots, these difficult shots at the same high clips, you need Terry Rozier's off the bounce, just 3-point shit. Like I'll boogie it down. I'll boil it down to that. It's just like you need his pull-up 3-point shooting might be the single biggest swing factor on this team right now that doesn't have to do with Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo suddenly forgetting how to master every single defensive coverage known to man.
Well, like on the theory that it always used to be Tyler Hero, and the question would be like, because, oh my God, the Heat needs someone to create offense, like someone besides Butler. But like it's got to be Hero, but is he going to be good enough defensively to stay on the floor? Like that was I don't know how many couple postseasons in a row. Like that was a huge thing we would always talk about. And now with Rozier there, it's like, well, that's the guy. Like he's the one, and there aren't nearly as many defensive questions about Rozier either. So it's like he's I mean, of non-stars, like he's way up there in just league wide postseason importance. Because again, I keep going back to this, but like a lot of what goes into being an X factor is can you do a thing that the team is otherwise probably not going to get from somebody else? And I think Rozier like ticks that box for sure.
They probably have other candidates if you wanted to go with Jaime Jaquez or Caleb Martin or
Haywood Highsmith. Let's deep cut it.
Yeah, let's deep cut it. But I think Rozier is the right one.
Yeah. All right, that takes us to the Bucks. And this was like easy to see coming from, I don't know how long ago, because we just didn't have questions about their other 4 starters. It's Jay Crowder. And I think you could swap him with just like literally anyone else that's going to be at that wing spot that's going to have to guard somebody, right?
Malik Beasley, yeah.
But so
if you think everything Crowder, like AJ Green factors into that, that's fine too. I just
Pat Connaughton.
Jay Crowder, it's will he be hitting his threes and can he give you the theoretical defense conceptually he is what you need, but in practice he just hasn't had it the past I would say like 2 seasons.
Yeah, well, I guess if he's out there with Giannis, Lopez, Beasley or Middleton and Dame, I guess he's guarding threes. Like that's and Crowder has been one of those guys that like maybe he was a true 3 like in his first couple years, but the league changed and he changed and like that guy's a 4. Like he has to be a 4. And now you're asking him to potentially, unless you want to have Middleton do it, guard somebody like pretty threatening in a lot of configurations. So yeah, I think on both ends, yeah, is he hitting his threes is another like massive, floor spacing. Like, can we really unlock all the levels of this offense question?
Who are you? And there's so much injury noise in here of late, but who are you we know who your 4 starters, or in theory, are like, we know who your 4 starters are going to be if you're Milwaukee. How are you going about the 5th? It's been all over the place lately because of who has missed games, but we know it's Middleton, we know it's Brolo, we know it's Dame, we know it's Giannis, but we've seen Malik Beasley in there, we've seen Jay Crowder, we've seen Patrick Beverley, we've seen some of those guys start together because of the injuries, but who are you actually starting or rolling with? Like, who is the ideal 5th guy to round out the lineup with those 4 in it?
I think there's just not a perfect answer. I mean, there's a flaw or two with every one of those guys. I think maybe it's Beasley, just because you're going to get another high volume 3-point shooter. But it depends on what the other team's going to have out there, because Beasley's been trying all year. It's been a nice narrative, but like, he's just objectively not a good defender. So
no, it feels like better. He's done better when it comes to kind of like switching off the ball and covering these bigger guys. But if you need him to go one-on-one with someone who has the ball, that's not, yeah.
Well, and if Lillard's not going to guard that guy either. Like, so it's just, it's tough. I think
now we've got that groin stuff too. And if that lingers, which is funny. It's the way we talk. I feel like maybe the pick should have been Malik Beasley, but for what you need and could then feasibly get defensively from who's left, it's probably Jay Crowder. It could be Patrick Beverley. It could be AJ. You go so many different directions with this. Yeah. I'll listen to cases for other guys.
Yeah. All right. Minnesota Timberwolves are next.
I don't want to have to say a word on this one. I'm just going to introduce who it is.
Give 3
initials. Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I mean, you could go, if you wanted to, you could go with Karl Anthony Towns' meniscus.
Yeah, sure. You could go with your guy Naz Reid. I mean, that's another one.
Really, I just don't want to pick stars. Do you know what I mean?
You just guys that deserve max contracts are just they're out. They're not allowed. Guys that are exactly as good as Karl Anthony Towns just can't be considered.
Oh, don't even throw that out there, because there are people that actually think. I love Naz Reid, but
that's insane.
Karl Anthony Towns is different offensively still.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I talk about Alexander Walker all the time. Like, can bring the ball up for you. Is awesome on ball defender. Can make some threes. Plays super hard. Like, that's just. You might look at some lineups with him and Edwards as your backcourt, although Conley hasn't missed a 3 in, like, I don't know, since February, it seems like.
Well, that's the other thing about Nah this season is he's been, when you're talking about wing shooters, he's been their most reliable wing shooter. It hasn't been Jaden McDaniels, and I guess the level of difficulty on some of Edwards' looks, that's, we get into that, but like, you need someone who can knock down the set, like it's Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
Yeah. I mean, everybody who's ever heard of 30 seconds of this podcast knows we love that guy. So.
Look, he has an all defense case. I don't think he's gonna make my team, but he has a case.
He has a case. He would need to have played more, 23 and a half minutes ago.
You are right, though. It could be Naz Reid because of the volume he'll have to shoulder. And then it's now because Towns isn't there, you do have to get away with more one big units featuring him. Mm-hmm. I just don't have questions about him anymore, which is why I couldn't bring myself, because what if Nickeil Alexander-Walker doesn't shoot 39% from 3-on-5 attempts a game in the playoffs? What if, he does make bad decisions kind of in traffic when he has the ball and he's bringing it up? The defense will be there. I think that's not something that'll go away. I have more questions, and this isn't to say that and I was also going to ask you, is there a reason, do you think, that Nickeil, like when we're talking 6th man of the year, that everyone gravitates towards Naz Reid, but not Nickeil Alexander-Walker?
As we were talking about it, and you said he has a all defensive team case, I immediately flashed to my 6th man ballot and I was like, oh, Naz not on it. What am I doing? Why is he not on it?
Couldn't this be what year was that in Utah where it was like both Clarkson and Ingles were basically just so high up, and one of them won it? I think was it Ingles that year, or was it?
I think it was Clarkson, and I'm sure I said Ingles should have won it probably.
Or was it Slow-Mo? What was that year where they had just 2 top 6 men? It wasn't Slow-Mo. At any rate, it's one of those situations where you probably could. I think I'm still going to pick Naz Reid from it, but
I think Reid is benefiting from the fact that like he's been inserted as a starter and has been just as good over a larger slice of minutes, which is just like, oh, this guy's actually a starting caliber player that happens to have come off the bench a bunch. So I agree. Like, if you have to pick it's got to be Reid. But
how does it impact you that Nas actually started more games for them than Naz Reid this year.
He should start 82 of them, I think.
First of all, they should trade everybody and rebuild around Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid
give me 5 Nickeil Alexander Walkers. I'll play him against anybody.
This next team was hard for me. Was it hard for you, and that team being the New Orleans Pelicans?
Well, it's hard in the sense that I think this team has actually has 5 guys off the bench that really matter, that could all be X factors potentially. And that's before getting into if you want, again, we're excluding starters. You could say Valanciunas is an X factor just because can they use him? Is he going to find ways to be effective as a post scorer and rebounder in a playoff format? I don't know, but I think Trey Murphy is who we're going to go with. And I think that's right. Just because he offers them this ultra spacing, because he shoots them from so deep that regularly in ways that most guys, most high volume 3-point shooters just don't. And this is a team that if there is a team out there that needs space more than most, it is the one that has Zion Williamson playing with Valanciunas. That's just a super valuable commodity. So I think Murphy is the right pick, just because of the athleticism, the spacing, and the fact that Trey Murphy lineups kick ass. They're good when he's on the floor, and he should play more, if anything.
2 things. I do find it funny that you said we're not choosing starters, and I'm counting there's a bunch of starters that are on this exercise.
I think we're not choosing stars. We're not choosing stars. Let's go with that.
Oh, I thought you said starters. I apologize, but
I say a lot of things.
The other thing with Trey Murphy too is I don't know that you lose something defensively going from Ingram to him, maybe this year a little bit, but Trey Murphy's had over the past month or month and a half, basically since the start, he's had some wild swings when you're looking at his shooting, where it's he was 1 of 8 from 3 one night. He was 0 of 9 in a win over Detroit. It didn't matter there. He was just 2 of 6 in his last game against Orlando. And so there's that, the volume is there and it's important, but there's also been this weird fluctuation. And then it's, what is he going to do in the playoffs? We've seen him be able to handle this, but when defenses run him off the line, is he going to be able to make plays in that regard? And then he's an even bigger X factor because he's starting for them now because of the Brandon Ingram injury. Mm-hmm. And so that just ups his X factor stock.
Yeah. Okay. This one I'm excited to hear about. We have the Knicks next up. You have nominated Bojan Bogdanovic. I agree. I think I'll let you talk about it. It's a little weird that they made this, the Knicks, you talked about this last time. They made this big trade and Tibbs is just I'm not going to use these guys. And Bogdanovic is definitely one of them.
Yeah. I mean, he had a, what was that against they lost that game, but he was instrumental in what they were doing against the Heat the other night. And I think, look, I think you could go Deuce McBride here just because he's playing so many minutes now. And that just might be the route. Is
he going to burst into flames just from sheer overuse? Is that why he's an X factor?
Well, also the fact that you kind of need him to hit these off the dribble jumpers now is maybe a little bit unsettling if you're a Knicks fan, but it's been fun to watch. It could be him, but my point is Julius Randle's now done for the season.
Yeah.
And it's sort of oh, okay, well, what do we do here? And we can just continue to play outside of having a 5-man a lot smaller, especially because OG Anunoby right now isn't healthy and we don't know if he's even going to return. I don't think he's going to play again during the regular season. Will he play in the playoffs? But Bojan Bogdanovic gives you size without rebounding, of course, but you just need that other bankable shooter score. Julius Randle, for all his playoff struggles, he's just important as someone who can generate and make shots. And so if he's bad, yes, it hurts you, but you need him to be good. And now that he's not going to play again this year, you're in this situation where it's, okay, we need to pivot somewhere. And are we going to give Bojan Bogdanovic ample opportunity to kind of take up that mantle there? And I hope they do, because we've seen in drips and drabs what he's actually capable of. And the fact that it then allows you just to play a little bit bigger, I guess it doesn't give you you'd rather have Deuce McBride defend a big, I guess at this point on defense. But I can't shake this feeling that you traded for Bojan Bogdanovic for this exact situation where it's either you thought Julius was going to be injured for the rest of this year or just not very good in the playoffs and you needed a different card to play on the offensive end. And I know that Deuce can change that, a little bit, but Bojan Bogdanovic is the more proven guy. And so I think that you need to lean on him more I won't say more, but at least more consistently. And how does that end up faring for you is just a huge question for this team.
Don't you think he's someone that I think of him as someone, and tell me if this is wrong, that like if you're giving him more minutes, they probably need to come from Josh Hart in a playoff setting. And I don't think Tibbs is just like gonna play Josh Hart as much as possible, or certainly has. But like Hart's a 30% 3-point shooter this year. We know he gets incredibly hesitant sometimes in ways that can really gum up an offense, which in the Knicks case, like cannot afford to be gummed up. So I think obviously just in a vacuum, Bogdanovic is shooting and the spacing he provides. And like, he's quietly going to like make the right decision, like moving the ball along in ways that some other Knicks might not. But like his specific abilities would, to me, seem to matter a lot more in the playoffs. And like when Hart goes is not his best self, like Bogdanovic is like the fix for that. He's like the he's going to get shots up. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to move the ball quick. Hart's going to do all the hustle, the ridiculous rebounding, transition attacks, all that stuff. They're really different players, but I can imagine a scenario where I think it would make sense to just obviously trim, because Bogdanovic is averaging 19 minutes a game. His last 5, his minute totals have been in the teens. Like Tibbs is not going to him in a big way still,
which is
knock down some of Hart's minutes and give them to Bogdanovic.
First of all, there's no shortage of minutes that you could yank away from basically everyone. You could trim like 2 to 3 minutes off of 4 different players, and there you go. Like that's how you
get 90 to choose from between Hart and McBride per game.
But the way that they have used him, it makes me think that the answer actually should be Deuce McBride. But I'm of the mind you traded for this dude for a reason. You now know Randle isn't coming back, and in this way, I guess some people might argue OG Anunoby is the X factor because he's injured and what's up with that elbow. He's probably a little bit too high profile for this. Do they only feel, and we just clearly haven't seen a ton of this because I think OG has only played in like, what was it? What did he come back for 3 games, 4 games or whatever? He's played that since January 27th. Do you only feel comfortable using Bogdanovic if you have OG Anunoby there to cover up for his stuff as opposed to just having Hart or Deuce McBride or Isaiah Hartenstein behind you? So like that, in that way, does Bogdanovic become more valuable to the Knicks if OG Anunoby is healthy? I just can't. Maybe. It's so bizarre. I want to make it clear. He is not played well enough to warrant a ton of minutes, but they need to give him a longer leash because I really do believe that they need what he does.
Agree. Let's move to the Thunder. This one, I think, again, the Thunder have a handful of guys that you could point to. We've got Josh Giddey, though, and I think just to start it off, it's like, is he going to get guarded beyond the 3-point line at all?
The answer is no. But will he hit the threes he's taking, which lately the answer has been yes.
Yeah. Can he make enough threes when he is not guarded is probably the correct follow-up question.
And I think what also makes him an interesting X factor is you could go, if you wanted to talk Case and Wallace, Gordon Hayward, Isaiah Joe. You know, I'm a big Isaiah Joe fan. What's so important is you want him to be able to stay on the court because what he does as a rebounder, even as someone who post All-Star break boxing out and then just like a creative passer once he gets into the lane, to have that extra, and I would say the latter might be the most important thing that he does, to kind of have that extra layer of diverse, multi-level, multifaceted playmaking aside from J-Dub and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You need that from him. And so if he's not going to be able to be on the floor, if he's not playing well, where do you go for that? Because that's not Case and Wallace's game. Like he can do some of the good 3-point shooter, can make decisions on drives, but he needs even more open space on his drives than Josh Giddey does right now. And then Gordon Hayward, like he's done some really good ball movement stuff there, but the volume just hasn't been there. And if he's going to be reticent to shoot, if he's not going to be, they don't need him to be super impactful on defense, but if he's not going to be someone where you feel his size on the court, then it's sort of, you get into these lineups where it's okay, we're even more reliant on J-Dub and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And then we're going to need something from Case and Wallace or Gordon Hayward. And that just is a risky proposition. And so he might be, when you're talking about, this is a household name, so to speak, with Josh Giddey or close to it. But it's the correct answer. I don't know how you make an argument for anyone else. I think if you were going to, it would probably be Gordon Hayward, but I really do think that kind of disconnects from the reality of who Gordon Hayward is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to say Gordon Hayward, then it could be Aaron Wiggins. And why is Aaron Wiggins going to play more than Gordon Hayward? Like that's a real question. The thing I was thinking about with Giddey, and I think, not to spoil it, but we're both going to have Mark Daigneault very high up on our Coach of the Year ballots. I wonder
for yourself.
Why he's not on yours, not in your top 5. I wonder
Look,
why
Isaiah
they
Joe's
don't.
minutes have been too all over the place. Mark Daigneault is failing the Oklahoma City Thunder.
It's just everything for you is through the Isaiah Joe prism. Why not use Josh Giddey like the Heat do this with Bam sometimes? The Warriors do this all the time with Draymond, where it's like he's not being guarded, throw it to him and run at him as a ball handler if you're SGA, and then a big is going to have to scramble up to try to help, and either you get SGA attacking a big or you get a clean look. Do it with J-Dub. I think there's ways to make Giddey like useful on offense if he's not going to be guarded, but it doesn't feel like the Thunder go to that as often as you see some other teams do with their I guess Green and Adebayo are both just generally more important. So you're going to try to throw the kitchen sink at how do we keep them on the floor? But there's ways to get, value offensively out of Giddey beyond his passing, I think.
Who would you pick if it wasn't Giddey? Is it Kenrich Williams? I think that might be my choice.
I mean, it might be Joe for me, not to get on your corner. But I can see a scenario where Giddey's not hacking it, and maybe you're getting two guys on SGA, getting it out of his hands, or you're forcing whoever's on the ball to get off it. And then I would love for Isaiah Joe to be the guy spacing that's just going to get some clean looks and could change a series just by making a bunch of threes.
11 of 10 take. No notes. We move on to the Orlando Magic now. I'm surprised. I actually wonder if we do disagree. I have Jalen Suggs, and I kind of made you the consensus was we'll go with Jalen Suggs here. I am a little bit surprised that you didn't want Jonathan Isaac, though.
I mean, I put his name up there just because, it's hard to say someone's an X factor if they're going to play 14 minutes in every game. But I think Suggs is the theory of Suggs just he's going to be the best defensive guard in probably any series he appears in. Is he going to do enough? And he's going to make open shots too, I think. I wonder if you have him here because you're not sure, is he going to play make enough? Is he going to do enough of the other, offensive guard stuff that he's not that great at to kind of, not be a liability in some sense offensively?
Yeah, it's look, is the 3-pointer going to continue to fall in the playoffs? Is he going to, because they're having lineups where he is, yes, you have Franz Wagner, you have Paolo Banchero, but they've relied on him for playmaking. Is that going to translate to the playoffs? The defense is just, we know what that's going to be. He's a first team all defense candidate. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people don't have him on their teams, but the key is that level of defender, and that will translate. But what can he do as a scorer, a floor spacer, a passer? They need that. They do a good job of optimizing their spacing. They just don't have the threats to then maximize what they've already optimized on top of that. And just look, the shooting's even more important with whatever the hell is going on with Franz Wagner this year.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think you could. Isaac is a fair case. Even Cole Anthony, though, just to have the other driving off the dribble shot making element that. And so if you wanted to go that route, if you're really just a firm believer that Jalen Suggs is too good to be an X factor at this point, I'll listen to you. Jalen Suggs deserves some MIP love, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think he's just, we know what he's going to do on defense. And right now we know what he gives you on offense, but does that translate to the playoffs?
Yeah, right. What he's going to be sort of what playoff defenses are going to ask him to do. And it's just can he do it? Because until this year, if Jalen Suggs was forced to do almost anything on offense, he was not going to be up to the task. And the 40% 3-point shooting, it's awesome. I think it totally changes his career outlook. Is that going to hold up? And if it doesn't, then Orlando's just not going to score enough. Orlando probably isn't going to score enough anyway. But that defense is so good that the bar is low for how much offensive production they need to maybe win a round or threaten somebody in the second, right?
That would bring us to the Philadelphia 76ers. And if I'm not mistaken, is this the first injured player we have on the list?
I think officially we've referenced a few, but I think this is the first actual nominee.
Yeah, DeAnthony Melton I don't see how the Sixers come anywhere close to defending at their peak without him, and that makes him the X factor. And then can he be in these lineups where maybe you're a little smaller, or is he going to hit enough of his own jumpers if they don't want to use Buddy Hield because he's had an awkward stint in Philly? Let's extrapolate that sample with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey together rather than just one or the other. If you want to go with Joel Embiid's knee, that's fine. If you wanted to play that card, And just because, and I would allow it just because of how choppy Joel Embiid has been in the playoffs, in large part because he's been banged up a lot of the time, but he has not been the most efficient postseason player by any stretch. But it's fucking Joel Embiid. He was the favorite to win MVP before his injury. He can't be an X factor.
Yeah, right. I think Melton is the right pick just because I was watching some of the Sixers against the Heat tonight, and it's just, if he's not going to be out there, one, you're asking Maxey to guard somebody threatening. Two, you're really asking Nick Batum probably to play and do more than he's capable of anymore. Or you're asking Kelly Oubre to be like a responsible basketball player on defense for a good stretch. Like that's a lot. So Melton, I think, is, again, going back to like, if he's not providing it, you're not getting like the really capable, like, I trust this guy to like wreak havoc defensive wing. So yeah, I think that makes sense. I would say like we haven't seen it really at all yet, but I don't know, Buddy Hield, like running around, spacing the floor. Like in theory, that was always such an appealing thing with Embiid commanding everyone to come to the elbow, basically. Like Hield, I think, is someone that should be like, oh my God, how do we stop this? Because we have to chase him everywhere, and we also have to devote all this attention to Embiid in the middle of the floor. There's something there in theory, but in practice, we just haven't had the opportunity to kind of road test it. But that's another one I would at least like, throw out there as a mention.
There's also, I mean, so if we don't know when DeAnthony Melton is coming back from his back stuff.
No
Tobias
time
Harris is dealing with a knee injury right now, but he had been like a functional atrocity for so long. He was playing a little bit better before he ended up missing, I think it was Thursday's game against Miami. But like that would be an X factor. And then if you're going to deal with this injury to DeAnthony Melton long term, I really think that would severely or significantly, increase the importance of, okay, well, what can we get from Nicholas Batum at both ends? How many minutes can he play? The scope of his defensive assignments, should Melton not be on there? There are no shortage of options for the Sixers outside of their two best guys.
Yeah, that says a lot. Let's go to Phoenix. This was hard.
We rapped about this a lot before. Cleveland and Phoenix were the teams that we kind of spent the most time going back and forth on beforehand.
We landed on Royce O'Neal, if I recall correctly. I mean, and like, we went back and forth on it, but I think we should feel pretty good about it, just because, like, just to pull the curtain back, like Thaddeus Young was an option. Grayson Allen was an option. Like Thad Young just might not play, even though the idea of him as a changeup to the conventional bigs is kind of intriguing. And Grayson Allen is just like, is he going to make a ton of threes or not? Like, I think he'll be guarded the same way. So what's the Royce O'Neal case here as the X factor pick?
The Royce O'Neal case is, you could make the same, is he going to hit enough threes, but it's, look at what he's going to have to do on defense, because they don't have anyone else to do it on the wings. I mean, no, I shouldn't say that. They might have other guys, but those guys will do nothing on the off. Like Royce O'Neal needs to do it because he's the guy that can also give you some semblance of offense there. And when you're looking at some of these teams that they're going to have to go up against, or not that they have to, but if they match up, they go up against the Clippers, if they even go, I mean, any team, just if they go up against the Nuggets, like he just might see an extensive run at Jamal Murray. I'm not even talking wings at that point. He'll see time against MPJ or maybe KCP, but he'll also see time against Jamal Murray. So you just name the matchup they're going to have, and he's invariably going to have to cover one of the two best players on the other side of it. And there's just you have other options to do it. Those other options are just, I mean, am I just saying things about Josh Okogie right now, like indirectly? So it's just not going to give you nearly as much in theory, or doesn't have as high of a ceiling on the offensive end. So I think it kind of has to be Royce O'Neal. If you told me Frank Vogel was going to use Thaddeus Young as the changeup, but like he's been reluctant to do that at points, and then you get into, well, could it be Bol then? Could it be Eubanks, just because if he's actually going to get minutes? Is it Kevin Durant at the 5 lineups? I know Kevin Durant is too high profile. There's a bunch of different ways you can go, but just in terms of what we know the Suns have to lean on, Royce O'Neal just feels like a constant. I think it would have to, I originally had Thaddeus Young, but I think the two right answers would be Royce O'Neal or Grayson Allen, because you kind of had relied on Grayson Allen to do some like pretty heavy lifting relative to what he's done in the past defensively too.
You said his name, but who I wish it was is Josh Okogie, because I wish what we were talking about is like, oh my God, he shot 37% from 3 this year on 3 or 4 attempts a game. His defense is so disruptive and his offensive rebounding is so valuable. is he going to be able to sustain that shooting? Like I really wish that that Josh Okogie was the pick, but he's just not going to play. He's not going to make enough shots to be. It hasn't played very much, and I don't think getting into the playoffs where every weakness gets magnified gives him good odds of seeing more playing time.
I will say sometimes it feels like among postseason teams, could the Suns in theory have like the most unpredictable rotation on a night-to-night basis? Like throw out the health stuff. I'm trying to think of what other team. I mean, they're on the screen right now. So what other team falls in? I could see Cleveland a little bit, but that might be more health related. Dallas is throwing some change ups. Miami will just try shit, but like not by design. So when you're talking about a team that not by design, their rotation just might be all over the place. I think it's Phoenix.
I think that's right. I mean, I would throw the Warriors out there. They've gone through a bunch of different iterations. Well, like, is Moses Moody going to play 30 minutes or 0? Who knows? Do you think
Steve Kerr thinks that's a feature, not a bug, though?
And so I think Steve Kerr wishes he had 8 guys that had clearly established themselves. Like although I mean, we're not talking about the Warriors, but like he's got a hand in the fact that like certain guys just haven't had the chance to do it or didn't get the chance soon enough. But yeah, I take your point though. The Suns, it's just like, we got 3 guys. We got Nurkic at center. Although Nurkic is someone that like, who knows how that's going to go against certain matchups, right? Like they're
probably better than Drew Eubanks.
But well, that's true. We do know that. That's all we know. The Kings are next and last alphabetically here. We did it. We made it all the way through without messing up. This is like a no-brainer to me. Right? Like I think and it might have been the case before Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter both got hurt, but it's really the case now. It's Keon Ellis.
Unless you really think that it needs to be Davion Mitchell or so. I will say you could make a case for Keegan Murray because of how important he already was defensively. Now he's even more important just defensively, but also offensively as well, because now you don't have Malik's driving and playmaking, and you don't have the idea of Kevin Huerter's motion shooting and kind of the stuff he could do off the dribble. And so you almost need like Keegan Murray to function as 3 different archetypes of players rolled into one.
It's too much. I mean, and Murray might be pretty close to, I guess we use Derek White. So like Murray's not as good as Derek White. So we don't need to rule him out for that reason. But like, I think Murray was going to be just critical no matter what. But Keon Ellis is someone like nobody on planet Earth knew he was in the league at all last year. Like he played a few games, 16 games, was mostly a G League guy. I mean, if you starting this season, nobody outside Sacramento knew who this guy was. And now it's just like, well, we need you to basically be our starting 2 and probably also do all the Davion Mitchell stuff because we can't play him in the postseason. So it's just like, I mean, and look, I don't think Ellis, there aren't many guys that are as tough on the ball against point guards as Mitchell is. But Ellis is capable. I mean, more than capable, and he's bigger and longer. So he's not just a one position guy. Not a high volume 3-point shooter, but 39% is like athletic, plays really hard. Like, he's not going to replace what the Kings have lost so recently in their backcourt, but like he's going to play a ton and he's going to need to play well on both ends for them to do anything, I think.
Yeah, they need him to hit his threes and then defend. I mean, on a lot of nights, it might just be, depending on their matchup, but if you're playing the Thunder, if you're playing the Suns, he's going to be if you're playing Dallas, no, not Dallas, because he's not going to be I don't think he would be the answer against Luke. He's going to end up on Kyrie in that match.
I was going to say you put him on Kyrie probably because that's too much to ask of Fox. Although Fox defensively has been good.
Yeah.
But he's so like, I mean, that really what these injuries do is put even more on Fox because he's going to have to guard somebody almost every night. Not that he can't do it, but in addition to his offensive responsibilities, like
Keon Ellis is kind of the safety net in that regard because you're not as example, you're not going to put Keegan Murray on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You will absolutely do that. You're not going to put Keegan Murray on Devin Booker. You're going to do that you're going to have Keon Ellis do that.
Yeah. It's going to be tough, but yeah, Ellis is really going to matter. I think he's a good player. This could really be like a show out. Like, oh my God, this guy's going to be a rotation guard for a long time, but we'll see.
Is he going to be a free agent this year? I don't know if they actually signed him to a contract. I should look at that, what his contract actually looks like, but he's
undrafted. They converted him, I think, from I can't remember now. We should have had that.
So I'm looking at, he's actually, they got lucky for he is under contract for 2 more years after this one for a whopping 4.3. all team control. I don't think it's a team option in the latter year. So they have him at 4.4 million in the next 2 years. That's a
hinky special, right?
And just like the fact that he is he's their second. Is he their second? He's their second most important defender right now. You can even make a case he might be their first.
God, I
think Murray's still like tops there, but
he's not lower than second. We know, although Fox is a really good defender, but again, it's just like too much to ask of him to be that guy.
Look at us. We did that under 75 minutes for 21 teams.
I'll take it.
We are on to stat padding, which we'll do a couple guess of players, but we have to start here, I think, just with the news. And we got into more of, we talked about this a little bit, but the Julius Randle season-ending injury with his shoulder. It was Chris Haynes reported that he actually re-injured it trying to come back, I think, while he was practicing. So that's ominous and not great. And we don't really have the Knicks are I think the reporting was the Knicks aren't worried if OG Anunoby doesn't play the rest of the regular season. Okay, cool, fucking awesome. They didn't guarantee he was going to come back for the playoffs. I'm just, a few minutes on this. Like, we need to be, do we need to recalibrate what the rest of the season now is supposed to be for the Knicks? They made some trades that implied correctly urgency, and these injuries, they detract from it to some extent because they have to. Just if you're not going to have Julius Randle, and if you're maybe not going to have OG Anunoby, you cannot. I know they're deep. I just want to make clear, depth of non-stars in the playoffs always matters less than you think it does. And it helps that the Knicks have these guys that they can play 40 plus minutes a night and they'll be used to it. That probably also increases their injury risk or them just petering out so late in the season. This is a team I do think my point is to throw to you, it's probably time to recalibrate, even if you think OG Anunoby is going to come back, because he's probably going to be playing through some pain in that elbow. What does he look like offensively then? It never was going to be, this is the year for the Knicks, but the way they acted at the trade deadline specifically was, this is a team that thinks that they have a chance to make it to the conference finals this season. And I really just don't see, Boston exists, so that absolutely matters, of course, but it's kind of like a free-for-all after them, and I just wouldn't have the Knicks as the second most likely team now to or the second best team in the East. And I was prepared to say that after the trade deadline, fully healthy, they could be that. They could get into a series with Orlando and lose at this point.
Absolutely. I think the way I'd look at it is it's probably a testament to how effectively the front office has sort of done its transacting, because the Anunoby trade was like, let's get better now. You're trading two young guys to get him. And the Bogdanovich and Burks moves were like, we want reinforcements. Like, these guys aren't, here for a good time, not a long time. Like, let's help now. But nothing the Knicks did sort of like had like an irrational or like, I don't know, premature sense of urgency, because like, you're going to re-sign Anunoby. I mean, I certainly assume so. Like, Bogdanovich is not the level of, and Burks are like, whatever. So they didn't do anything that like, we're going to give up this like down the road, like super valuable chip to get way better now, and we're willing to make that sacrifice. That really wasn't the tenor of their move. So it's like, while the injuries now, I think, mean like, this year's kind of like, if you hooked them all up to polygraphs, well, who knows? Because Tibbs probably has them believing, and Jalen Brunson, I'm sure, is not going to like concede anything. But it's like, you should acknowledge, like, we don't have the best shot this year, but I don't think that forecloses on them being the second best team in the East next year. Right. Like, I think, so, I mean, so to answer your question, like, you do have to just shift how you're viewing this team now, because like, look, I mean, the second they play, I mean, how long did they go without an entire starting front court? It was like several weeks. Right. So it was like, even just from that point, it was like, this year is kind of like, I mean, even if you get all these guys back, presumably they're going to be somewhat compromised or whatever. And now it turns out like, I don't know, you're getting one back, maybe two, if Anunoby comes back. I don't know. So yeah, it's a shame, because I think they could have been really interesting as a playoff team at full strength, but like, I don't think it like darkens the outlook long term. Do you?
I mean, it does make it a little bit harder to go through the offseason not understanding how what was your projected starters look together when you're talking
Yeah.
about like having an extensive sample of Julius Randle, or even a sample if you still view Mitchell Robinson as the answer to start long term. Randle, Robinson, OG, Jalen Brunson, and then Dante DiVincenzo or Josh Hart, however you want to finagle it that way. So I think it makes it harder to go through the offseason. It does, like this season specifically. You could tell me that they won a playoff round. That kind of feels like their ceiling. Like now, if you're not going to, certainly if you're not going to have OG and Randall,
Mm-hmm.
I just, when you're trying to scale ahead, I was actually going to ask you too, like when you scale ahead, it's what does this team still need? And like not going into a second best player or someone as good as Jalen Brunson. I guess my question there would be, and a lot of this is going to be determined based on how the postseason actually ends, but knowing that Julius Randle's not going to play, and I would say knowing that OG Anunoby, even if he plays, isn't going to be anywhere near 100%, even by late season standards, doesn't it make it harder to then kind of decide, well, like, what are we going to do? Like, if there's no brainer trade candidate, top 15 player in the NBA that comes on the market, that makes a ton of sense. Well, it's kind of like, well, what do you do? Do we just run it back because we think we will be the second best team in the East as currently constructed? Not having that information is just complicated.
Yeah, it complicated is right, because I think the Randall piece is tricky almost no matter what. Like we've talked ad nauseum about, like, he's not either of our favorite players, but like, boy, he kind of really fits what the Knicks need as just a guy who's going to get some shots up. And like, what do you do? Is he a long-term piece? So that complicates it. I do think like they should be emboldened by the fact that like they did, when guys get hurt, sometimes there's silver linings. And in this case, it's like Isaiah Hartenstein is a starting caliber, good, awesome defensive center. Like, I don't know how much he can play, but you learned that. You learned Dante DiVincenzo could be a really high volume, effective 3-point shooter. You learned Deuce McBride could play a ton of minutes and help on both. Like, you did get some information about guys that maybe you would not have gotten had your whole roster been healthy. And so that's valuable. And I think if you're the Knicks and you say, we're getting all these guys back, we're going to re-sign Anunoby, and now we know that guys, in DiVincenzo and McBride and Hartenstein, who are going to be like our 6th, 7th, 8th guys, are like capable of being way better than that. Maybe you do still think you're the second best team, and maybe you don't feel the urgency to make a big move to add this other star. I do think it would be nice if Brunson didn't have to just pound the ball and like create so many shots, but like, I don't know. I think there's a way to frame it where you, as the Knicks, are like disappointed that the season went this way, but you did kind of get some information on guys that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten. That's going to be valuable and should make you like pretty confident in some ways about like the depth of your rotation next year, if not necessarily like, what's the piece that we need to like get some more top end talent? I don't know if you have that information.
And look, the lineup right now I'm just curious to see what their offense looks like, because everything feels like a slog right now. But I would say their go-to unit, or I think would remain their go-to unit, even with Mitchell Robinson healthy. I'm assuming no OG, no Randall, Hartenstein, Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, and Dante DiVincenzo. Do you know what that group has as an offensive rating on the season?
I have no idea.
142.8. And that's in like
seems
300 possessions. So it's not this huge sample, but it's a pretty big, like it's big enough to be like, oh, there's something here. They've held their own defensively, which I guess makes sense because you have Deuce, you have Josh Hart, you have Hartenstein, and then we know that both Brunson and DiVincenzo really do compete on that end.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very curious. So that's your baseline. What are the counters or the adjustments you make in the playoffs? Then it's like, okay, well, you have Mitchell Robinson healthy now, but I'm looking more at the perimeters. How do you fit Bojan Bogdanovic into that? What is it? How important is Precious Achiuwa come the postseason now? Is he someone whose importance kind of increases as if you're looking for someone who can maybe spend time with a big if it's Hartenstein? So they're in such an awkward spot, and their depth matters, but I do think this might be a case of they are built to thrive in the regular season. And while a lot of the stuff they do on principle defensively will hold up in the playoffs, I'm very concerned about what their offense ends up looking like when teams look at what they're already doing to Jalen Brunson, where it's like, if he's just on the wing, he's seeing 2 and 3 bodies every single time. Now they're just going to have more time to even game plan for him since it's just this set series.
That's such a hallmark of Thibodeau teams, though, right? Like he gets his guys to play, with their effort level at a 10 all the time in the regular season. And I think the Knicks are an example. Obviously, lately it's like a joke how much some of these guys are playing, and how hard they're playing. And then the Knicks, I think, are probably just better prepared a lot of the time. And that's another Thibodeau thing. And in the playoffs, like that sort of stuff evens out more. And I think that's a pretty direct tie to why Tibbs postseason teams have kind of not performed nearly as well as you would have expected them to based on their regular season records. But yeah, like, I don't know. We started out this conversation talking about like, how should this change how you feel about the Knicks? And it's hard for me to not almost be more optimistic. Cause like, imagine you get everybody back next year. And so then your first unit is what? Brunson, Randle, Anunoby. I don't know. Is McBride at the 2? Is that what we're doing?
No, I think Robinson? You would have. Well, I mean, first of all, who's your starting 5? Are you re-signing Isaiah Hartenstein and starting him? Or are you starting Mitchell Robinson? I think we'd probably go with DiVincenzo in that, like, just by virtue of having Randle and then potentially Robinson. I think, I would want DiVincenzo there.
Yeah. Okay. Either way. And but then
your bench is awesome. To be more optimistic long term about this team. I just think in the short term.
Oh yeah.
If we're just raw. A lot of people have gotten caught up in how they've performed, and they've played really well.
Yeah.
The playoffs are going to be tough. And that's a good spot to wrap this up. Is there a team right now that they could match up with in the first round that you would guarantee that they could beat? They might look, it wouldn't shock me if they beat Cleveland, if they beat Orlando,
Indiana,
if they beat Philly, if they beat Miami, if they beat, who else is in this fucking, I'm not going to even include like
Indiana.
The Bulls or the Pacers, but I could also see them losing to every single one of those teams.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Although, like, how would you have felt that differently if they were fully healthy?
Oh, yeah.
I
would have picked them over everyone except for Milwaukee and Boston. And the way Milwaukee plays, I might have picked them over Milwaukee.
Well, yeah, you might pick them, but you asked me, like, would you guarantee that, like, they're definitely going to beat these teams?
So I'll phrase it this way. I would have, if OG Anunoby even was just healthy, I would have been floored if they didn't make it out of the first round.
Yeah, I think that's a fair expectation. Anunoby was just so good, but like for that stretch when he first came over, and they were so good. I guess maybe what I'd say last thing is like, I don't think I did get too caught up in like, oh my God, they're holding it together with a skeleton crew at this point, just because I just assume that when the games, we get to the playoffs with them, it's like, they just don't. All these guys, so many guys are like playing more and playing over their heads. And like my expectations for the Knicks was like, I wasn't going to be disappointed if they got bounced in the first round, I guess is the best way to put it.
No, it would have shocked me. I mean, this is a team that I think has set themselves up still well for the future. You can get into, they've played all their best prospect hands. Does that take away from their trade offers, even though they have those picks? But look, now they have the living embodiment of what if Steph Curry could win Defensive Player of the Year and Deuce McBride. So, and he's not playing above his head. He's playing perfectly even keeled relative to what our expectations were. Do you want to hear? I said this to someone, I can't remember the other day. Deuce McBride, and this is the only negative thing I'll ever say about the players. Deuce McBride is who I thought Frank Ntilikina was going to be.
Oh God, I can't believe what has come out of your mouth right now. Frank has so much time left to still reach his potential.
I was watching Frank Ntilikina Instagram hype videos the other day, so I'm still very much on the Frank Ntilikina bandwagon.
That's the most on-brand thing you've ever said.
Are you ready to you want to do a couple guess of players before we get out of
here? I got one for you. You ready?
No, but let's do this.
All right, this is from Mike. Clue number 1. I was part of an all-time weak draft class in which only 2 first-round picks ever made an all-star game. Only 1 lottery pick from the class ever made an all-star game. Me.
Only one? Is it Andrew Wiggins?
No. I don't know why.
Did they say an earlier year and I just missed you saying?
No,
that?
You don't have a year. That's why that's like, you're never going to get it off that clue, or I wouldn't. Clue number 2. It comes as no surprise that I was an all-rookie team member, but not the rookie of the year. So good rookie. Clue 3. By my 3rd season, my team was a championship contender, and I, despite only being in my early to mid-20s, was the team's 2nd most important player. You haven't gotten zeroed in yet here. Oh, here's one. Clue number 4. During back-to-back failures in the finals, My team's answer to trot alongside me changed 3 times in the calendar year.
Lost consecutively in the finals.
That's helpful.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of which team. I was the only lottery pick from my draft. Is it Kyrie Irving?
No, it is not Kyrie Irving. I'm just reading this next clue. Would you like to hear? Would you like
I
to hear?
guess go ahead and give me another one then.
Clue 5. Alonzo Mourning and I got off to a disastrous start together as teammates. He said our team was lazy and mocked me for missing time with an ankle injury, muttering to the team after a loss, "My ankle, my ankle." What I should have said was nothing, but that's no fun. So I instead mocked him for having life-threatening kidney disease, which had kept him out of previous seasons. Side note, Mourning and I are now friends.
Oh man, who? Why? I should know this. Tim Hardaway? That's too far back.
No, not Tim Hardaway.
Well, you're like thinking about it. I hope you have the answer.
Well, I was trying to think if Hardaway would have fit the like lottery all-star earlier clues.
I should know this. Lottery. Jamal Mashburn?
No, I like that guess though. I did not remember the Alonzo Mourning. I did not remember Alonzo Mourning was a teammate of this player. I don't know what that says about me.
Gary Payton?
Nope.
Jason Williams? No, that's it. I'm just naming players that I know played for the Heat at some point. Antoine Walker? Should I keep going?
You want another clue?
Yeah, please.
All right, clue 6. Okay, the year with Mourning didn't work out. I was traded to Denver for 3 firsts, where I would be teammates with Melo and, you guessed it, Greg freaking Buckner.
Traded to Denver for was it Denver for 3 firsts? That Allen Iverson doesn't make sense here.
Iverson only lost 1 finals, I think, also. Right?
I should know this based off the Denver trade. Can you
back-to-back finals and then eventually gets to Denver
for 3 first-round picks? I'm trying Melo teammates. I should know this. Why don't I know this?
This is right on the border. Like the clues are good, but he's not giving it all to you here. You want clue 7?
Yeah.
Clue 7. I played in Denver for 7 seasons, making the playoffs in 6 of those seasons. Only making it out of the first round in 1 of those years.
That's not really helpful because that's still just a Melo teammate.
All right, how about this? Clue 8. When the NBA lockout hit, I went to play in China. I asked to be released to handle family matters, but wasn't allowed to sign with an NBA team once the lockout ended initially. Instead, I had to wait until the Chinese league season ended.
I'm going to want to blow my brains out when I find out who this is because I should this all sounds so familiar and I can't figure out the name.
Yeah, I feel like the back-to-back finals and the lottery stuff is like it's far enough back that like it might be outside of your like prime fandom, but now we're up to where like you will know it.
The lockout was on the Nuggets. Did Al Harrington make an All-Star game? Wasn't in consecutive finals, was he? I don't think he played with Alonzo Mourning.
This next clue is a doozy. I forgot about this one. You want to hear it?
All right, hit me.
Clue 9. I did sign with the pre-Lob City Clippers, in which I played 42 games. My most notable moment as a Clipper actually took place in a playoff game between the Lakers and the Nuggets, as a drunk woman stumbled onto the court asking officials and security if she could meet me. I had not been a Nugget in over a year by this point.
Who is this? Why can't
I? Let's see. Oh man, I'm confident you will get it by clue 11. The bad news is we're on clue 10. You ready for clue 10?
Yeah.
I finished my career playing for the Knicks and then the Bucks. So now he's just rubbing it in your face by this guy being a Knick for a minute.
I got nothing. Like, okay. I have nothing.
You almost have too many clues now. I know the feeling where it's like you can't keep it all straight. All right, this is your last clue. My kid is currently on the Sixers, and I'm part of the many father-son duos to have played against LeBron.
My kid is. Oh my God, Kenyon Martin. Oh,
Yeah, you got it. Good job.
I did forget that he played for the Bucks. Oh God.
I forgot like the morning stuff. I forgot. I guess he was on the Heat for a year. Yeah, that sounds right. I just think of him as the Nets and then Denver are like the two Kenny Martin
Yeah.
teams I think of.
Okay, so I have a
Great
couple here from
Denver.
Austin. I'm reading you one from Austin that he claims we didn't do. I could have sworn that we did it, but if we did it, um, clue number one, I spent several years playing college basketball for Xavier, where I averaged over 14 points per game in my final season.
David West.
No. Clue two, I spent 4 years of my NBA career with the Indiana Pacers.
Oh man, are you sure it's not David West? Okay, wait. Xavier to the Pacers for 4 years. I don't know if I know any other Xavier guys off the top of my head. All right, go ahead.
Wait, I'm dying at the especially. So I guess we didn't do this, but Austin said nobody would ever guess redacted, but it's just funny how all the clues line up to sounding like it should be David West.
Yeah, they sure as hell do. Correct.
Clue number three, I was drafted by the Pelicans.
Wait, what?
Because that lines up to David West.
Is this? It might be gaslit, and it is in fact, or David West's actual name is like Dave or something. I have to guess. Why do I want to say Ramon Sessions?
I don't know why, but
Okay,
that's incorrect.
what a great guess that would have been.
Clue number four, I'm a career 81% free throw shooter.
Okay, so wait, drafted by the Pelicans, out of Xavier, good free throw shooter, 4 years with the Pacers.
I really don't think you're going to get this one. You'll get it on clue seven, I think. But
all right, let's continue.
Clue five, my most recent team was the Hornets, where I couldn't quite hang on as an NBA level player, and as such went to play overseas. I'm going to give you clue number six as well. No, I am not David West.
Hornets most recently. God, is it like I don't know why like Bryce McGowan's came into my head. I have no idea if he fits.
He's still on the Hornets.
Okay, well maybe that's why I was trying to think of Hornets.
He was also drafted by the Hornets, not the not the Pelicans.
Pelicans. Okay, yeah, I don't have it.
Clue seven and final clue. A notable media bit came at the hands of KD, throwing my name under the bus as to why the Nets weren't having the previously predicted success. And so I'll expound upon that. Remember his interview with Chris Haynes, our colleague, Chris Haynes?
Yes. Oh, I can even like see I don't think I'm going to get this. What is that guy's name?
I can give you an eighth clue that I just thought of.
Oh, yeah. Please.
If you squint and listen, when someone says my name, it can kind of sound like they're talking about one of the four seasons.
Oh, yeah. Sumner.
Yeah.
What's his first name? Edmund?
Yeah.
Okay. God, that's a deep cut.
That's a deep. There's no way. Maybe that's why we didn't do it, because I didn't have clue number seven until this week. Like he said, Austin sent it, and there's like no way based off the other clues. They all lined up to be David West, and like Edmund Sumner is such a deep cut.
That's a deep cut. You know what though? Respect. That I mean, he was in the league for what 6 years total. Like that's fair game. That's fair game. The David West parallels are bizarre. That was
funny. Yeah, that was great.
All right. Let's see. I'm trying to think.
Let's do one more each because we'll have more in the next podcast.
Okay. Do you have one ready? I'm trying to decide.
Yeah, I have a second one from Austin. Actually, let me go to Rubik's Gal Sent Trivia. So let's mix it up. And then I'll go to Mike and Austin when we do the next batch. Okay. On the all-time points leaderboard, every player in the top 20 has had at least one 50-point game. John Havlicek is the highest scorer for 21st on the leaderboard to never have a 50-point game. He had 12 40-plus point games, but his highest was 43. Let's see if Grant can name people on the leaderboard who never had a 50-burger.
That's a really hard question.
Well, I'll give you clues. There's 4 different spots here. So number 22 all time on the scoring leader list, 26,301 points. On the leaderboard is this one-time MVP, one-time defensive player of the year, one-time champion, and trash talker extraordinaire who got 44 times and maxed out at 47.
Defensive player of the year?
Yes.
Oh, is it
And a champion.
Kevin Garnett?
Correct.
Okay.
Number 34 on the leaderboard at about 23,800 points. I'm just going to round now. Former MVP who had tons of 40-plus point games, most of them for the Philadelphia 76ers, but never managed to score beyond 47. His love for food is only matched by his hatred of jump shooting teams.
Oh, Chuck.
Wow. Great job.
That's crazy. He never had 50.
Never had a title either. Did you know that?
That's true. I do recall him averaging like 40 and 30 in a playoff series against the Warriors when I was like 12 years old. That was rough.
Number 37 on the leaderboard, 23,334 points. Four-time champion, played third fiddle on one of the greatest dynasties of the last 50 years. His role meant that he often had more rebounds than made field goals, plus made free throws, and he only had one 40-point game in the NBA. When he retired in 1997 after picking up his fourth ring, he had played more seasons, 21, and more games, 1,611, than anyone else in NBA history.
Wait a minute. Four-time champion retired in 97?
I actually did not know this player retired this late.
What was the thing about the rebounds? It was a fourth.
His role meant that he often had more rebounds than made field goals and free throws.
Is it like Robert? It's not Robert Parrish. There's no way he scored
That
that
is
much.
correct. You were 3 for 3. You're on fire.
I can't believe he scored that much. Well, you're giving me clues.
I wouldn't have gotten the Parrish one. I didn't think he was around in 97.
I mean, he was around for a really long time.
All right, final one. Number 41 on the all-time scoring list, 22,211 points, is the current Warrior who has had 8 40-point games, all against Western Conference teams, but none higher than 43. He knows more obscure NBA rules than you've ever heard of, and he's a dear friend of Scott Foster in an alternate universe.
Yeah, Chris Paul.
That was, I mean, you should have gotten that one. That was actually a fun, I don't mean to sound surprised. That was a really fun exercise. I am very impressed by what you just did.
There's like, if you didn't give me the clues, there's no chance. Like,
Even based off the clues, I don't think maybe there were two givens on here. Garnett and Paul. Like, for you to get Parrish and Barkley, you went 4 for 4.
Well, the jump shooting teams was a giveaway for Barkley. I feel like I think of that with him. Okay, I'm going to give you a guess a player that I don't think you're going to get. I would not get. Do you want this one? Because this one's been sitting here.
Yeah.
This is from Nicole Chekolev. It's been sitting in here for a couple weeks. I feel bad I haven't done it yet.
Yeah. I mean, I already went 0 for 10. So let's do this. Oh no, no. I got it on clue 11.
Yeah, you got it. You got it on the clue you should have gotten it on, because that was a hard one. All right. I'll tell you, this is another ex-U player, ex-Yugoslavian player. Just put your mind in the correct spot.
Okay.
Number one, shockingly, I'm a player from an ex-Yugoslavia country. I was part of the 03 draft, where I was the last one of 3 players from my country that got drafted in the first round. While I was not the most hyped prospect, I arguably had the best career of the 3. You're going to get better information here. Clue number 2, a 3-and-D wing. I spent 12 years in the NBA. So that's from 03 to 15, I guess, playing for 7 different teams. I played in more than 500 regular season games and more than 50 playoff games.
Holy shit.
So this guy, that's more than I would have thought. Clue 3, I got drafted by the Jazz, but I did not stay there for long, but not by choice. I was selected by the Bobcats in the 04 expansion draft and later got traded to the team that defined my NBA career.
Keep going.
In the 07 playoffs, I started every game en route to the NBA Finals that year, where we got swept by the Spurs. I averaged over 30 minutes and under 10 points.
No. Oh, my God. I almost just... Is it Zydrunas Ilgauskas?
No. Ready?
God, so he was on the Cavs, because weren't they the team that got swept by the Spurs?
That is correct. I will give you that.
It's not Anderson Varejao, is it? That can't be him.
Mm-mm.
Started every game? Why don't I know this?
I did not remember that. That's shocking to me.
All right, keep going.
All right, clue 5. The legend says that I beat LeBron James in a one-on-one match and I won a BMW from him. On the record statements say that I actually bought the car from him.
I've never heard that before, so I don't know who that's going to be.
All right, clue 6. From 09 to 13, I bounced around to 5 different teams before ending my NBA career on the Portland Trail Blazers. After that, I played in Europe for a few more years before retiring in 2016.
I don't even have like a name to venture a guess.
Yeah, so far the Cavs thing is really your best way in. I told you this was a tough one. Clue 7. My first name is Alexander, but that's not how I'm usually referred to. Similar to Alexander Vujacic. So like, what's the like the nickname for guys? Well, you know, like what's Vujacic's first name that he was referred to by? Do you remember?
You talking about Sasha?
That is the name that is like stands in for Alexander for a lot of XU guys. So you have Sasha as the first name.
Oh man, I'm not gonna.
Sasha on the Cavs that made the finals in 07.
Man, no idea.
It's hard. All right, you want to hear it?
Yeah.
Sasha Pavlovich.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten that one.
Yeah, that's like I know that name. I can picture him, but the like other than the Cavs thing, that's tough. But you know what?
I'm upset. Take us out of here. That's great though. Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah. Thanks, Nicole J. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Rubik's Gal. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching.
Thanks, Austin. Don't forget about Austin.
Oh, thanks, Austin. Yeah. Thanks, Austin, for your ridiculous Edmund Sumner / David. I still don't believe that's not David West. Everybody, please rate, review, subscribe, spread the word about this podcast. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. We close, as always, with a shout out to the one and only Frank Ntilikina, got to mention today, and an apology to Jared Allen.